Somehow, whenever I make these videos, I always find myself back at Bloom.
Oh my god, I'm blooming!
My first episode of Character Creator was a Burgeon unit. A couple years ago, I made a Kaveh rework video. And last year, I did a T2T episode where I turned Ranmei into a Bloom-based buffer and support. For this episode, we're once again revisiting the archetype with a different take on how we can spin its mechanics. I chose to make Luocha our mascot for the design. His kit in HSR is just as a healer, so I'm giving him a unique role as a specialized Bloom unit. And as always, additional info is down below, and captions are available if you need them. Without further ado, let's just jump right in and get started. I'll start off with the general information on the character. Looking at the visuals that Luocha has in HSR, I chose to make him a Dendro sword user. It's gonna be a very interesting parallel to Nilou's Hydro sword, so I decided to go all in with making the connections more noticeable. Nilou has an HP Ascension stat, so Luocha's is gonna be an attack bonus. Onto his actual kit. For his skill, Luocha will heal the entire party based on his attack and deal AoE Dendro damage. This ability has a 12-second cooldown and generates 4 particles upon hitting an enemy, and that's all it does. His burst will deal Dendro damage and grant party members with the Abyss Flower effect. Abyss Flower grants a flat elemental mastery bonus that scales on talent level. Additionally, when nearby enemies take Bloom-related damage, all party members are healed based on Luocha's attack. This healing can occur once every 2 seconds. If Luocha heals the active unit in particular, he will deal an instance of Dendro damage. This has no ICD, and is considered burst damage, which allows Luocha to have good Deepwood synergy and Dendro application. His burst will have a 13.5 second cooldown and a 50 cost burst. Onto the A1 passive, where his specialty lies. Just like Nilou, Luocha will enable Bountiful Cores, but his method is slightly different. Whenever Bloom or Lunar Bloom is triggered, all contributing units who weren't the ones triggering the reaction will gain a stack of Overgrowth. Upon dealing any form of damage, they consume 2 stacks and create a Bountiful Core. Just like with Nilou, these Bountiful Cores explode really fast, have larger AoEs, cannot trigger Hyper Bloom or Burgeon, and will still be considered as Bloom damage. Each party member can have 3 stacks of Overgrowth at a time, so you can store an extra stack in reserve for future use. Overgrowth can only be consumed every 0.5 seconds. The Bloom idea came from Imaginarium Theater. When Bloom Blessings are in the season, one of the upgrades is that there's a chance to spawn an extra Bloom Core. In concept, it was pretty interesting, so I designed something that could work well for a character mechanic, but instead of simply creating another core, the idea was, what if the Bloom Core came from the Aura character instead of the trigger? When it comes to regular Bloom, there's always one slight problem I seem to notice. Because the reaction has forward and reverse variants, Hydro units have an easier time triggering the reaction, which means Dendro characters act as the aura. Dendro characters tend to have EM scaling kits, but that EM stat sees less value if these units aren't the ones triggering Bloom. Luocha enables a special mechanic that allows them to make their own Bloom cores that scale with their HP. Not HP. Fuck. Luocha enables a special mechanic that allows them to make their own Bloom cores that scale with their EM stat. By making them Bountiful Cores, we can also prevent issues of having too many on field at once, since the detonation happens at 0.4 seconds, and we also prevent issues of Electro or Pyro characters stealing triggers for Hyper Bloom and Burgeon respectively. It's also worth noting that Bloom Cores have a limit on damage frequency, but it also isn't going to affect Luocha's kit design. Quoting directly from the wiki, one target can only take 2 instances of damage from each Bloom-related reaction per source every 0.5 seconds. Reactions triggered by a given character will not share this limit with reactions triggered by other characters. Also note that Dendro Core explosions and Bountiful Core explosions are counted separately. The more meta and theory crafting players already know about this rule, but I figured it was still important to break this down just to avoid any misconceptions. Especially because, while making this video, I was part of the people who had a misconception on the mechanic. The really important part is that an enemy can take a max of 2 Bloom hits per source, which basically means each character. You can see with the footage here that I created 4 Dendro cores, 2 with Columbina and 2 with Kokomi. When I insta-burst them with Kaveh's skill, You can see that Kaveh and the enemy both take 4 instances of bloom damage. In the case of Luocha's kit, it doesn't matter if the reaction enablers start creating their own dendro cores, the cores are still coming from separate sources. Onto the A4 passive, all Bountiful Cores created by Overgrowth specifically have their damage increased by 4% for every 100 attack Luocha has. Additionally, whenever the active party member is overhealed, Luocha creates a Bountiful Core 0.5 seconds after. This can occur once every 1 second, it will not consume an Overgrowth stack, and it can still activate even if Luocha has no Overgrowth stacks reserved. Finally, the core created from this passive cannot trigger Luocha's Abyss Flower healing from his burst. Once again, paralleling Nilou's kit, Luocha's A4 provides the same type of bloom damage bonus that Nilou has. The bonus is overall weaker because it's only able to buff Overgrowth Bountiful Cores, and it has a smaller value on its buffing. It's mainly to balance out the damage because, unlike Nilou, who converts existing cores, Luocha is allowing extra core generation, which effectively increases the team's motion value. In addition to the damage buff, Luocha is able to create even more of his own Bountiful Cores. While his attack scaling is able to buff the damage of the cores, it's not going to be as high as an EM scaler. So I went in more of a direction of quantity over quality. Instead of hyper buffing his own bloom damage, he hyper generates the amount of bloom cores. In a lot of cases, Luocha could consume 2 stacks of his Overgrowth with the A1 passive, which means he creates 2 Bountiful Cores, which is already hitting the 2 core limit. The half-second delay means that the extra core is generated just past that limit, so all 3 can still deal damage. Also, his healing is limited to a 2-second interval, but the 0.5-second cooldown on the A4 passive actually makes Luocha function a bit better with other healers. Lauma is able to buff bloom damage, and at C1 is capable of healing, which would overlap a bit with Luocha's kit. Similarly, some people like to run Kokomi as a Hydro driver, which also overlaps on the healing section. But I specifically worded it so that the active character can be overhealed from any source to trigger the passive. This means double healing from both Luocha and another healer can cause Luocha's A4 to proc more often. It's basically a way to turn unnecessary healing into offensive utility. Technically, Luocha can use this ability in non-bloom teams, but it won't be consistent. His consistent form of healing is his burst, which relies on bloom damage to occur, but his A4 can't trigger the healing, which means in a non-bloom team, the only way to trigger the effect is through his skill healing or a secondary healer. That's mainly it for Luocha's kit design. Now that we covered the kit, we can look at how he plays into different teams. What makes him interesting is that only the dendro cores created by Overgrowth are converted into Bountiful Cores. This means all of his team will have a strange mixture of dendro core variants, but this mixed bag also means a few characters get unique buffs or synergies. Luocha was mainly designed with Kaveh's kit in mind, not so much to make him more meta, but something to make his design feel more functional. 1, his abilities to make Bloom Cores insta-burst don't really align with the 2 Bloom instances every 0.5 second limit. If he causes 3 or more cores to burst, and all 3 are from the same source, only 2 of them deal damage, which wastes a ton of damage potential. At the same time, he's only a Bloom buffer, and can't buff Hyper Bloom or Burgeon. And while a Nilou team works for Kaveh, there's some repetition since Nilou also provides insta-burst cores and bloom damage buffing. Luocha isn't the ultimate fix to Kaveh, but it still manages to address a chunk of his issues, as a bit of a compromise. By allowing certain characters to create Bountiful Cores, there's this shift in utility. Characters who create Bountiful Cores can utilize his bloom damage buff, but he can still occasionally use his abilities to burst and buff some regular bloom cores. But with an Electro or Pyro user, a good majority of the regular bloom cores would go into Burgeon or Hyper Bloom. They don't get buffed by Kaveh, but it also won't get wasted by the 2 core limit. Oh, unless you consider the fact that all of my concepts are within the same alternate version of the game, in which my Kaveh rework idea, which did allow him to function better in a Hyper Bloom or Burgeon, would exist alongside the Luocha kit, therefore making them much more synergistic. And by that logic, you could also make a team with the Ron Mei kit, since her design also focused around bloom teams. It only took a fake rework and 2 fake character kits, but hey, Kaveh might actually be meta now. On to the next aspect, which applies to every unit who acts as a bloom aura. Creating their own bloom cores also means their EM stat gets put to use. As mentioned before, Dendro characters act as the aura a lot of the times, but are also EM scaling. So when Hydro is a trigger, the Dendro character's EM isn't going to be used for bloom. With Luocha's passive, these Dendro units can now utilize their EM for bloom damage a lot more consistently. Luocha and Nilou would also have a really strong synergy with one another. Luocha is only able to buff Bountiful Cores created by Overgrowth, but Nilou is able to buff the damage of every Bountiful Core, which includes the ones produced by Overgrowth. Another character to get buffed is Lauma on a nascent Gleam team. She can buff bloom damage and allow the bloom cores to crit. As a Dendro unit, she'll also likely act as an aura and contribute Overgrowth stacks for her own Bountiful Cores, which have significantly higher damage from her high EM stats. Of course, Lauma's bloom buffing is locked behind a 36 stack limit on her burst, which would get eaten up faster with the extra bloom cores. And while Luocha was designed around giving Kaveh flexibility in non-pure bloom teams like Hyper Bloom, Burgeon, or Quick Bloom, the side effect is that characters already designed around these team synergies also get buffed. Alhaitham is one of the examples here. He's someone who already functions very well as a strong Quick Bloom DPS, providing strong Dendro auras and quick and focused damage. But with Luocha, he can now create his own bloom cores to deal additional reaction damage. In a similar vein, Tighnari has Quick Bloom potential, so he can also be very strong in these teams. Finally, an off-fielder like Nahida plays really well in Quicken and Bloom. She stacks a lot of EM, which will further boost her bloom damage when she creates the cores. For the final major synergy, let's remember that Luocha is still a healer. Out of all the Hydro units we have, he'll pair the best with Furina. Furina fulfills the role of a Hydro applier and wants a lot more healing for her fanfare stacks. Since her damage buffing doesn't work on bloom damage, she pairs much better in personal damage teams such as Quick Bloom or a Kniche Burgeon team. It's a pretty good balance of damage types. Furina and the main DPS on the personal damage section, with Luocha and the Electro/Pyroflex contributing reaction damage. Let's wrap up with basic builds and a signature weapon. Pretty simple, but full attack with enough ER is going to be his optimal build. Even though his burst cost is only 50, he may run into some energy issues for a few teams, so an ER main piece is a viable choice. You can technically run full EM for better bloom damage, but the attack build will double for strong healing and roughly the same bonus that EM would provide. One of his best sets would be Deepwood. The characters he wants to support, mainly the Dendro ones, tend to have EM scaling kits that make Gilded much better on them. But if you're running someone who already has Deepwood and is also not that good of an EM scaler, such as Kale or Kirara, Luocha himself can run Gilded since he'd be the better bloom DPS in that scenario. It's also good that his attack and EM can both pool into bloom damage, making the set slightly better for its reaction damage. For weapons, ER or attack is best, and Luocha has a good handful of free swords. Your classics like Fav or Sack Sword provide good energy utility. If Luocha himself can actually trigger bloom in a rotation, Sapwood is a good weapon to provide extra EM to a party member. Amenoma is an attack sword with an energy regen mechanic. He can only get one stack in a rotation, but at R5, 12 energy is a really good refund on the burst. Finale of the Deep provides a ton of attack stats. A 565 base attack is on the higher end of a 4-star weapon, and it's mixed with both attack percent and flat attack stats on the passive. Then for a 5-star option, Skyward Blade has an ER substat, but not an amazing passive. Summit Shaper provides high attack on the substat alone, but the passive is reliant on Luocha being an off-fielder and having a shield. And finally, we have the signature weapon. The Light Cone, Echoes of the Coffin, is already a good name, so we'll keep it as it is. It'll have a 674 base attack, along with a 33.1% attack substat. At R1, the character gets yet another 16% attack bonus, so you get a free 49% bonus from the get-go. Upon healing a party member, everyone will get an EM bonus scaling on 6% of the user's attack, which lasts for 8 seconds. And finally, if a party member triggers Bloom, the user regenerates 12 energy. The energy passive can only occur once every 18 seconds, and both effects can occur while off-field. I'm seeing everything through with the Nilou parallels, which meant the weapon was going to have a similar passive. Nilou's sword provides EM to the team based on max HP, while Luocha's sword gives EM based on attack. But since Luocha is a burst-reliant unit, his weapon also gives some energy. It's reliant on Bloom, which should be a non-issue for Luocha himself. The energy regen means he might not have to run an ER main piece anymore. For other users, this weapon is best used by healers. While the energy passive is Bloom reliant, the EM bonus is healing reliant, and this also means healers don't necessarily have to run this weapon in Bloom-focused teams. The main drawbacks are whether a character is attack scaling and whether their healing uptime is enough to maintain the EM bonus. Kuki, Farina, and Shilonen all have means of healing, but they're not really attack focused, so the passive would be weaker. Bennett healing is HP scaling, but even if you give the guy a full attack build, it would be enough for survivability. The passive is more so reliant on having the active unit be below 70% HP to heal in the first place. It's also a higher base attack weapon, which is good for his attack buffing. For attack scalers, Lynette can self-heal, but she also has low uptime on the healing frequency since she likely uses her skill once in a rotation. Kaya can maintain better uptime with his A1 healing, so long as you swap in or play him on field so you can use his skill more often. Sincho is also not the worst option since his A1 lets him act as a pseudo-healer. The uptime on the passive is reliant on taking damage since the rain turrets have to be broken to trigger the healing effect. Clorand is debatably okay at using this weapon since she has self-healing. She's attack scaling, so while her damage might take a dip from a lack of damage percent in crit, it might not be as significant. And in a quickened team, the EM can help close the gap even further, especially if you use that EM to buff other team members. Finally, Jean and Chi-Chi. Jean can be a decent support for a lot of teams, some of which can use the EM stat much better. But for Chi-Chi, while she has really strong uptime on the passive, I don't fully know where she'd best fit for an EM buff. Melt? Fridge? Superconduct? Nah, it's not like Superconduct's gonna get a buff anytime soon. Some of my previous videos used a direct reaction mechanic, such as my Luca video for direct burning and Bailu for direct electrocharged. Honestly, this Luocha video covers the niche of direct bloom reactions. I remember I was hoping that Lunar Bloom would create a way for Dendro characters to better utilize their EM stats for Bloom, but that never happened, so I took matters into my own hands. Luocha's kit is basically one of my many takes on what I would have wanted Lunar Bloom to do. But anyway, that'll do it for the video. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribe to support the channel. Let me know in the comments what you liked about the kit design, what you might change, and any other ideas you might have. If you want to share more ideas with our community, consider joining my Discord server. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!